Peace, family. Welcome to another Drapetomaniac podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is, the head Drapetomaniac in charge. And we're here to have conversations on how to get off this plantation. I saw a clip this morning on one of my feeds of a woman testifying before Congress about how expensive it is to be poor in America. I've seen many testimonies before Congress over the years about everything from racism to economics to the environment to any kind of safety regulations of one kind or another. Now, whenever I see this, I have one question that drowns out basically anything I hear being testified. And that question is, who are you talking to?
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that you listeners are listening to the Drapetomaniac podcast on doayamedia.com. You are, right?
I saw comments in reference to the testimony the woman gave, and people were saying things like, it won't do any good, or they don't care, and so on. And I feel that same way, definitely. But I want to take it a step further. I used to think that the government doesn't care about the people at the bottom, particularly black us. But I have awakened to the fact that it is far worse and deeper than that. There's an active hostility and contempt toward us. About 3 months ago, I did a podcast called Sociopaths in Charge, and I outlined why it does absolutely no good to appeal to people who are quote-unquote in positions of power and especially elected officials. Presently, while the country is in financial freefall and people whose rents and mortgages were due on the 1st of this month, this is July, and didn't have the money to pay it, let alone when it comes due and is compounded at the beginning of August, they still haven't worked out anything for the people who are struggling and sinking. And in the midst of it, they went on a 2-week vacation, which they're on right now. And when they come back, they'll work for another couple weeks and then go on vacation for a month while people are still plummeting into financial ruin. What they did is tantamount to an entire city block being on fire, and they only send out 3 fire trucks to put out the blaze. Then, after they and their friends have looted everything inside that's salvageable that's inside the buildings, they leave everything burning. As the already inadequate response from the fire department with only 3 trucks looks at their watches and says, it's 5 o'clock, time to knock off. And since it's Friday, we won't be back until Monday. And they pick up and leave while the buildings are still burning and while people are still inside. I'm sure that most of us have had the experience, whether working in an office or in a warehouse, where there was something that absolutely had to be done before the next day. And we had to work overtime, sometimes for several hours, and were not allowed to leave until it was done. That's what happens for us regular people. I personally had an experience where I was working for a graphics company, and I had a 60-page magazine that I had designed, and I had spent about a month designing this magazine. It was around 4 o'clock. I'll never forget this. It was around 4 o'clock, and I was backing up the files. As I was doing the backup, the system crashed, and this caused not only my files that I was working on, but the backups that I had to all become corrupt at the same time. I spent about half an hour trying to get these files back because they had to be ready by the next morning at 10 o'clock. They had to be. There's no way around it. There's no wiggle room. And since I couldn't get those files back, I basically had 17 hours to put back together what it took me a month to construct. And so I stayed there all night long. I didn't go to sleep. The only break I had was a couple times when I went to the snack machine to get something to eat. But that's all that I didn't even really have that time to spare. And so I spent the entire night, all the way around the clock, not leaving the office until it was done. And I had it put back together by 9 o'clock that morning, and it was ready to go out by 10 o'clock. But my point being, I could not leave. I had to have that done. And it didn't matter how I got it done. I needed to stay until it was finished. My point is that for us regular people, we can't just blow things off when there's a pressing issue that needs to be attended to, or else we'll lose something, whether it's a customer, a client, or a job. But these elected officials, these bought and paid for pieces of useless human garbage, will sit and watch everything and everyone crash and burn and leave and go someplace and sit on the beach. These are the people with whom we're dealing and who we're talking to. So I have learned to stop saying they don't care. What they do is far deeper than not caring. They display a thinly veiled disdain for the general population, and black us especially, as I said before. Think of it like this. Say someone's drowning and you have the ability to save their life, but you don't care anything at all about this person. And there are all kinds of people standing and they're looking at you, and you're concerned about your reputation. You're concerned about how you look. So you'll go in and you'll save that person, not because you give a crap about them, but because you're concerned about what you look like or what people think of you when they see you, if they were to see you just standing there doing nothing while this person's drowning. Okay, now take that same scenario and say the person who's drowning, you hate their freaking guts and you want to see them dead. And there's all kinds of people standing there looking at you. You know what you're going to do? You're going to just stand there and let them drown and smile as you see the last few bubbles coming up. And you wouldn't care less what anybody thought about you, what anybody had to say about you. You would not care. That is who we're dealing with. That is who we're talking to. A bunch of sociopaths who have the added dysfunction of also hating us, and that's a bad combination. The solution, you know what I'm about to say. Separation. As I said last week, every moment we spend talking to them, seeking to reason with them, seeking to persuade them, or even force them to do something on our behalf, are moments that we are not thinking on and or working on ways to separate and escape this trick box, this plantation. This isn't going to be much longer. I don't see where these podcasts will necessarily be lasting any longer than they are. And they may actually start becoming shorter because even I see the redundancy of them. The main point is, and will always be, that we're dealing with a system that not only does not care about us, but that is actively hostile toward us. And that's something that we must get deep into our minds and our spirits so that we can stop wasting time on this lost cause of seeking to reason with those who lack empathy or souls, and to put our energy where it will actually accomplish something, like separating and creating a life of peace for ourselves, our loved ones, and our people. Thank you again for listening to this edition of the Drapetomaniac Podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC. You know what it is, the head Drapetomaniac in charge. And I wish you peace, and as always, until next time, I'll see you on the run.
And thank you again for listening to the Drapetomaniac Podcast. Tune in next week at doiamedia.com. DOIAMEDIA.com. And again, we'll catch you on the run. Peace.